Money FM 89.3, the best of the afternoon update.
Welcome to Industry Insight. Now, we've all heard of the jibes about accountants and how they're called bean counters. Well, people in the industry would argue that managing beans isn't all that they do. These days, accountants are probably the ones helping companies grow the beans, price the beans, and make sure the beans are sustainably sourced. Joke aside, today we're drilling down into the accountancy profession and industry in the eye of the digital and regulatory storm. In APAC, finance teams are juggling a rapid rollout of AI-driven reporting tools, sweeping ESG and sustainability mandates, and an ever more complex tax and regulatory framework. At the same time, talent shortages in data analytics and advisory services are squeezing CFOs and audit partners alike. Well, the result? Firms that once thrived on historical ledgers now need to master predictive forecasting, real-time dashboards, and soft-skill leadership to stay competitive. So how can accounting professionals bridge this capability gap? And what does the future skill set look like for tomorrow's finance leaders? To unpack the findings of ACCA's 2025 Global Talent Trends Survey and translate them into practical action, I'm joined today by Chiew Chun Wee, Regional Head of Policy at ACCA. Chun Wee, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Lindy. A pleasure to be here.
Now, Chun Wee, let's set the scene. ACCA's survey spanned thousands of finance professionals across Asia Pacific. What stood out most to you in terms of where Asia Pacific currently sits on the talent curve?
Well, this is a big question to start off with. I think there are a few key headlines coming out from the study, including, I think, seeing that the profession is showing a high level of entrepreneurial drive. They're doing side gigs on top of their day jobs, and they have high mobility intent. There are quite a few things that I'll be quite keen for us to unpack in this discussion. But one of the key things which I'll be especially keen to talk about, and I think you mentioned earlier, bean counters, but the value of the bean, how to grow the bean, the sustainability of the bean. I think one of the very exciting things that's coming out for our profession is how sustainability is becoming such a big part, and the big role that our profession can play. So again, that'll be something which I'm sure we'll go into later on.
So was it accurate in describing what you guys do these days?
Well, as I said, we're very, very keen to debunk that bean counter kind of perception. And I think as we go along with this conversation, talking about the different aspects of the work that we do, hopefully by the end of this conversation, we will be able to conclusively say we are not bean counter. This is maybe one small element of it, but this role is way, way bigger than that.
Okay, Chiew, I'm looking forward to it, really. Now, it's clear that while technical know-how still matters, there's also a hunger for new capabilities, especially around data and digital fluency, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was actually at a secondary school a few days ago talking to some young kids about, what they might be looking for, what they should be looking for in their career. And I was describing to them, how it was during my time. I've been working for more than a quarter of a decade. And how when I first started, a ledger was really a physical ledger, like a huge, heavy book, right, that you have to carry from the library to your workstation. And then, when you need to look for something, you can't just do a Control F. You need to just flip through and really spend days and nights just trying to tie the numbers. And the defining characteristic of a good accountant at that time includes the ability to draw very straight lines and write in very small, neat fonts. Right? Obviously, time has changed and it will continue to change. So I think technology has enabled a lot of things today, and that has taken away all the mundane stuff that people from my era used to hate to do.
Okay.
Right? And I think this is really exciting time for us to be in the profession.
So just out of curiosity, which specific skills did the ACCA survey identify as most urgently needed, and where are organizations coming up short?
Well, there are a few things. I think when we look at AI, there are a few aspects to it, right? I think one of the findings that we see is about how respondents think that they are not necessarily prepared for the future. And in fact, if you look at the Singapore numbers, 65% of the finance professionals, they are concerned that they're not developing the right skills. And this is, everything, AI, sustainability, and so on and so forth, right? So I guess the first question to ask is there a disconnect between awareness and action? So they know they're not there. Are they doing something about it, right? And looking at the Singapore data, so I dig a little bit further into, the different questions and the numbers that are coming through. We don't know for sure, but I think there's some hints there. So one of the follow-up questions we asked in the survey was, what's stopping you from being confident that you have the right skills? Globally, the one option that's most selected by respondents at 44% was simply not enough opportunities to learn about it, right? 44%. In Singapore, it's also the top reason, but the percentage is much lower. It's 34%. So I think that suggests that we do quite a good job as a nation to provide such upskilling opportunities. But, right, and that's a but. In another question we asked them, is your organization providing you with the opportunities to learn AI-related skills? Now, globally, more than half say yes. So organizations are providing opportunities. In Singapore, however, it was a very, very much lower 27%.
Oh.
So if you try to take that together, right, you might postulate that while opportunities to learn are aplenty in Singapore, not many of those learning opportunities are offered or facilitated by the employer. So I think that's really something for the organizations to think about, right? You need to invest in your people. When you say that I want you to thrive and not just perform, it can't be just a slogan. You need to help your people feel less nervous and more prepared and ready for the future.
Chiew, we've got a lot to get through. So moving on, you talked about digital skills, imagine data analytics, digital reporting, and so on and so forth. What about soft skills like critical thinking and communication?
I was, again, in my sharing with the young kids that, the soft skills are particularly important in the days where, AI is really taking over a lot of the fundamental technical stuff that we do. And it is about the ability to do storytelling. It's about the ability to think in a very integrative manner. So I want to pick up the thing that we kind of touched on very briefly earlier about sustainability. And I want to give you an example. So about 5-6 years ago, I remember I was part of a judging panel trying to review some reports. And I was looking at an annual report and then a sustainability report by the same company for the same period. And this is a world-renowned company. If I tell you the name, you'll know who they are. Okay. And when I was reading these two reports, I was just thinking, they don't feel and look like they're from the same company because they're saying entirely different things. So very clearly, it was prepared by two different groups within the company that don't really talk to each other. Now, fast forward to today, we know that sustainability, climate change, etc., this is high on the agenda for government, for civil society, for businesses especially, right? And I think one of the key skills that professional accountants need to have is the ability to connect, right? They have historically been very deep in the financial space, but now they need to also know what climate change is about. They don't have to be climate scientists, but they need to know what is the implication on the risks and opportunities that the company is facing. There's a transition that all organizations need to go through to be ready for the future. What is that transition going to be like? You need to help them navigate. You need to understand what a strategy should be like and so on. And then you need to be able to communicate that. So that part of the equation and the financial part of the equation need to come together. And I think financial professionals, they are uniquely placed to do that. And therefore, that soft skill that we're talking about, the ability to think in a very integrated manner, system thinking, is so critical in today's world, and also the ability to then tell that story in a very coherent and convincing way to everyone else.
Okay. Now, the survey also tackled how automation and AI are reshaping roles. So how are finance teams in Asia Pacific adapting to these technologies? And where does hybrid work play into that equation?
all of us went through that big experiment, right, during COVID, where we think maybe hybrid is not going to work, virtual working is not going to work, but it all worked out okay. But again, the trend that we're seeing today is a lot of businesses kind of going back to a kind of full-fledged work in office kind of format. And that has been, I guess, a consistent finding for our Global Talent Survey in the past 3 years. And when we contrast that with the desire, first of all, what is your actual working format? And then what is your desired working format? And you can see a very big contrast, right? A lot of people are back working full-time in office, and yet, a lot of them are saying, actually, hybrid will work best for me. So how do you reconcile the two? I think this is actually giving rise to a lot of tension and nervousness in people. They are not doing what they necessarily be able to. So I think part of it is for companies to recognize that there's this desire, and you need to be catering to your people in the right way, giving them the ability and flexibility to work in the right way, and then giving them the tools in terms of technology so that they're able to work effectively in that kind of format. One of the questions that we raised and want to highlight from the survey is about the entrepreneurial
Yes, I was going to get to that.
Yes. And to us, this is a very exciting and interesting finding, right? Because you see that, half of the global respondents and 37% of the respondents in Singapore, they want to become their own business. They don't own their own business. Right. I think this entrepreneurial aspiration actually carry really great implications to employers. You have your talent who are brimming with creative energy. They have the urge to want to take charge. So how do you provide the environment that will give them the benefit of both worlds, where they get the safety of employment, but also the platform to stretch their entrepreneurial muscles, so to speak? And also how do you allow the organization to actually benefit from that creativity? Now, the term that, we did roundtables and we get this discussed, the term that gets thrown about quite a bit is intrapreneurship. And, we've heard different variants of how it's done in different companies, and they're called different things, right? Innovation hub, sandbox, whatever term they use. But the key really is to give the people space. Give them the opportunity, the autonomy to brainstorm, generate ideas outside of their regular work, right? And importantly, creating the psychological safety for failures that often come with experiment. So one classic example that, our roundtable participants raise is the Google 80-20 rule, right? Where they're allowed to use 20% of their time to pursue their personal projects that they're passionate about. So apparently that gives rise to things that we're familiar with, like Gmail today. So I think employers really need to have their own version of 80-20, whatever works for you. But, hopefully you will then be able to retain the creative talents within your fold so that they continue to benefit from their ideas.
Okay, so you see that as a positive sign. Isn't there some risk of an exodus of accountants leaving the profession?
I actually see it positively rather than negatively. I think there are professions who want to leave to do their own business. Although there's one nuance to it, Lindy, when we try to look at it globally, and in the report you will see a chart where we try to chart the correlation between the entrepreneurial aspiration and the GDP per capita of the country. And you can actually see a clear correlation. And I think what that's telling us, and through roundtables people are telling us the same, is that sometimes when they want to leave to do their own business, it's because they don't have a choice, right? There isn't as plentiful employment opportunities. They need to come out and do their own thing. So I think that partly kind of explains why in the more, developing economies, the entrepreneurial aspiration is much higher, right? In Singapore, even though we see, I think it's 37%, it is lower than the global average, right?
Okay.
So that is, to me, not a bad news, because what businesses need to do is to make sure that they're giving the employees the opportunity to really release their creative energy, and that can work to the benefit of the company. From my perspective.
Okay. Yeah. Another statistic we see here in the report that shows a high level of mobility intent among the participants in the survey. 65% of Singapore finance professionals are planning to move roles within 2 years. What's your take on this? What's driving this wave of movement?
Whenever I see this high mobility intent, I always think back to my parents' era, the boomers, right? I would describe them as the 4040 club. People in their generation, they work 40 hours each week, 40 years of their life in the same job, right? And of course, I think we all recognize it's pretty rare today. The first thing to say is I think a healthy dose of mobility is not necessarily a bad thing, right? It will be a bad thing if it's driven by push factors. The work is horrible, my boss is horrible, the job scope is horrible, I need to leave. But it could be driven by something else, and I think that's what we're seeing here. And recognizing that most people, they don't want to be doing the same thing over and over again. Right? They see their career as one that allows them to collect different experience along the way so that they can grow as a profession. So I'll put that as a challenge to them for a year, right? And for them to really think about how do you inject energy and freshness into the roles, right? You can provide exposure to different parts of the business. For example, this individual may be sitting in financial reporting today. 2 years later, you put them in sustainability steering group, and then another 2 years in FP&A, right, to do analysis. So as soon as the talent, they see that their job is not stagnant, they're not doing the same thing day in, day out, I think the likelihood of retaining them, despite this high mobility intent, is still quite high, right? And I think when you engage with the younger professionals, this is what they're saying. Like, I don't want to do the same thing. If you give me new experience all the time, I'll be happy to stay.
Okay. Chun Wee, we've run out of time. It's been a compelling conversation through this ACCA talent landscape. But before we wrap up, very quickly, one piece of advice for finance leaders looking to turn this survey insights you were talking about into action over the next year.
I think there are two parts of it, as employers and then as individuals. As employers, I think this survey gives you a lot of signals on what you need to be focusing on. And to my earlier point, don't just say, I want you to thrive, but really put your money where your mouth is. So that's the key message to employers. To professionals, to individuals, this is a great time to be in the profession. There's so much happening. AI is transforming our role. Sustainability is such a big thing. So make sure that you are giving yourself opportunity to be upskilled. Don't get just, stuck in the day in, day out, the same thing over and over again, and give yourself the space to grow and to take advantage of the development that we're seeing in the world around us.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Chiew Chun Wee, the Regional Head of Policy at ACCA. Thank you so much for sharing ACCA's insights and your guidance on future-proofing finance teams in Asia Pacific. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Lindy.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.